Hi, this is Yohan. In this episode, I'm gonna share this really fun wall hanging project performing freestyle curve in this lovely and refreshing seaside theme with the sunset sky. The finished measurements are about 21 inch by 30 inch. I made the PDF pattern for this project if you wish to follow similar flow and dimension. Nonetheless, since this is improv piecing and somewhat abstract approach, feel free to modify the pattern according to what you need. You can make it smaller or larger or use different color shades. There's really no limit for this project. A few years ago, I made a similar wall hanging project using jelly roll strips. That one was more arbitrary though. I simply play around with the fabric strips and the colors. So if you prefer that kind of approach, you can go and check that one too. And that's a fun project as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and without further ado, let's get started. First, we're gonna work on the upper section of the wall hanging, which is gonna be the sky. So these are the colors that I'm gonna use for the sky. I've got blue, light blue, and kind of grayish blue. And for the sunset effect, I'm using this light orange and peach color. The way I'm gonna piece this quilt is from the top all the way to the bottom. Here I've got two strips. The first strip is about 3.5 inch wide and the second strip about 3 inches wide. You may cut your strips between 2.5 inch up to 4 inches wide, and the length should be about 20 inches long. Now let's overlap these strips. I overlap my strips about 2.5 inch. The width of the overlap is totally up to you. This is a freeform curve piecing style, so there's really no hard rules to follow here. If your fabric has the right side and the wrong side, both of the strips should be facing right side up right now. And then we're gonna start cutting in between this overlap. Now, to make this tutorial easier to understand, especially if this is your first time trying to do the improv curve piecing, I'm gonna draw a line right on the bottom edges of the bottom strip. Now, you don't really have to do this. I usually just feel it, or I can just kind of see visually with my eyes where the line is sitting. I rotated my fabric vertically so that it's easier for me to cut. So let's go grab your rotary cutter and then start cutting from the bottom. Cut in between the overlap. So as you do the cutting, just wiggle your hand to make the curves. Your fabric may tend to want to shift a little bit, so just use your other hand to try to hold the fabric. Don't worry about getting it too perfect, just do the cutting. It doesn't matter if it is smooth curve or sharp curve. It's totally up to you. Once you've done that, remove the top right fabric and the bottom left fabric so that you are left with two fabrics and they should be matching just like puzzles. Now lay the fabrics right sides together, and then let's head over to the sewing machine and I'm gonna show you how you can sew these pieces. We're gonna start by matching the top edges. Use your 1/4 inch presser foot attachment and then start sewing, following the curve while keeping the edges of the fabrics aligned. Every so often you may need to stop and reposition your fabric, especially when you get to the deeper curve. Meanwhile, try not to pull your fabric too much. Your goal here is to align the edges of the fabrics. The 1/4 inch foot in this case really helps to control the movement of your fabric so that it will stay in between the 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you've done that, press the seams towards one side. It doesn't really matter which side. I simply follow whichever side the fabric naturally wanted to sit. Next, I'm gonna join this light gray strip. This strip is about 3 inches wide, and I'm gonna overlap this at the bottom, rather narrower this time, about 1 inch of overlap since I want to do smoother curve. Once you've done that, let's remove this excess strip at the top and at the bottom, and we're gonna sew this just the same way. The smoother curve is much easier to sew rather than the deeper curve, obviously. So this is another variation that you can do. And of course, we're gonna press this towards one side. Next, I'm gonna join this light orange strip for the sunset effect. This is a 2.5 inch strip. This time I overlap the strip on an angle, just like that. And then I'm gonna work the same. So overlap, cut, and then sew. And there you go. For the next strip, I want to do a sharper angle. involving the previous 2 rows. So this will create a different, more interesting effect. You can do this every now and then to add more dramatic look to your improv panel. So these panels, just the same way, you may need to take your time a little bit and don't worry so much about making it super perfect. This is an improv piecing, so liberate yourself from perfection. Alright, this is how my fabric looks like now. So you can see the dramatic overlap. Really interesting. Now for the next strip, it's very important to try to balance this. So this is a 3-inch strip. So I overlap this rather straight-ish, just trying to neutralize the previous extreme angle. This way the fabric will not go towards one side only. So try to keep your fabric in balanced proportion, especially horizontally, so that it's easier later to square this up. For the next one, I'm going to overlap this at rather the opposite angle than the previous sharp angle that I did. So if you do any sharp angle previously, it's very important to alternate different angle so that everything will look even and also will look more interesting. So let's continue piecing this sky section until this panel measure between 12 and 13 inches tall. Alright, I'm gonna stop here for the sky section or the upper section of this quilt. This panel is now measuring about 13 inches tall. Now it is very important to make sure that the bottom edges is straight, not on an angle or wonky. Now for the water section or the lower section of the quilt, you want to use some shades of blue, starting from the very darkest blue to the lighter blue, or you can also use greenish blue or emerald color. Although I ended up not using all of these colors, and I also added beige color for the sand. Alright, I'm gonna start the water section with the darkest shade of blue. So this is a navy blue strip. I'm using a 2.5-inch strip here. Now this is another important part. We're not gonna do any curve piecing for this, but rather regular straight stitching. So this way it will create the horizon line, which distinguishes the sky and the water part of this wall hanging quilt. So I'm just gonna use one strip for this very dark blue, and for the next one I use the lighter shade of blue. So overlap this. Basically we're gonna continue the curve piecing from here on. So start from the darker shades of blue, and as you go down you want to change the shade to the lighter blue shades. Keep sewing until your fabric panel measures roughly about 28 inches or so, or until you are satisfied with it. So you can go longer or shorter, it's totally up to you. Alright guys, now I am at the very last row of this quilt. So here I've got a 5-inch wide strip in light beige, which is going to be the sand effect for this quilt. And I'm going to do quite an extreme overlap with pretty sharp curve, just like so. And voila! I am pretty much done with my piecing. Now it's time to square up this panel so we have a nice and even measurements all around. Now first thing first, it's very essential to keep the horizon line or the line that divides the sky and the water section. So we're gonna make sure that this line will remain straight. Fold the fabric right on that straight horizon line, just like so, and then start working on squaring up this panel from here. I want my quilt top to measure 18 inches wide. So first I'm going to take away just a little bit from this side to straighten up all the edges. And from here I measure 18 inches and cut. Next I'm going to trim the top and the bottom edges so that this panel will measure 27 inches long. Next we're going to add the border. For this project I'm going to use 2-inch wide border. First we're going to sew the short border to the top and the bottom, and then sew the long border to the sides. Once you've done that, layer the quilt top with the batting and the backing fabric, and then baste this. You can do pin basting, that's what my preference is, or spray basting. Next, you want to quilt this as desired. I use my walking foot to quilt this, simply echoing the curved line from one end to the opposite, and then pivot, and then continue quilting. You can also free motion quilt this or hand quilt this. And once you've done quilting, trim off all the excess batting and backing, and then finish your quilt by binding this with your favorite binding method. If you need a tutorial on how to bind your quilt, I have a separate video on that, so you can check that out. I will place the link somewhere in the description box down below. That's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.